Welcome to the Accounting Profits and Prosperity Show. I am your host, Louis Prosperi. Our guest today has inspired and helped businesses to hire the right teams for their success and growth. Please welcome to the show, Jamie Van Cuyk. Hi, Jamie. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, to be quite honest, I'm very excited about the show because it's all about hiring and finding the right team and dealing with those issues. And I did look at your website. One of the areas is it's one of the biggest issues related to business failures, right? Having a cohesive team. Just go through, based on your experience, why that is so important to have a successful business.
Yeah, your teams are so important to have a successful business because they help produce your products. They help provide your services. They are touching everything within your business. So if someone's not doing their job, whether it's you have the wrong expectations out there, whether you hired the wrong person, whether you hired the wrong position in general, you have those things wrong. Like there's things going wrong inside your business that's going to impact your output, that's going to impact your customers. And if your customers aren't happy, they're not going to continue giving you money. And therefore your revenue is going to go down and you're most likely not going to stay in business. So even those team members that don't directly impact with your customer, impact that customer experience.
And I couldn't agree more. You said it brilliantly. I think we don't realize the importance of the people in our business. We think it's other parts of the business that are running it, but at the end of the day, it's the people, right?
Right.
And if you have the wrong group or they don't work well together, and I like the fact that you called it a team because team is different than staff. So I really think that was very, very helpful. Here's one that I come across a lot, which is the fear of bad hiring, right? They don't want to hire the wrong person. And what ends up doing is like a deer in a headlight, right? They need to hire. So what should they look for? What are the common issues in hiring staff to get rid of that fear?
Yes. And this is such a common fear. It holds so many businesses back. And the problem is it holds you back to the point where you're so desperate, you go and rush and make a hiring decision because you needed someone 3 months ago. So some of the things to really kind of stop making bad hires is first and foremost, really understand who it is that you need. And this is more than just a title. You might know that, okay, I need someone to come in and do this work. It's going to be this title inside my organization. But you need to know more than that because this exact same position with this exact same to-do list in another company could look completely different in terms of who is going to be successful in that role. So when I start working with clients, the first thing we really focus on is what does success look like in this role? Not what tasks are they going to do? What does success look like? What impact will this role have on your organization? Once we know that, we can then work into really figuring out who is that idea candidate. Because just because someone's great at what they do doesn't mean they're right for you. So you really want to make sure you're focusing on finding the person that's right for you when you go through the hiring process and not just someone who can do the tasks but doesn't fit into your organization, or even someone who can't do the work, but they wow you at every step of the organization because they say all the right things.
Well, I think that's the hardest part, to figure out that person, the one that says the right things, but they can't do the work. But let's go back on the success part. I want to have a follow-up question on the success part. What are the things because what we usually do, and this is traditionally, is we look at what they do, like job description, and say, that's it. That's what we're looking for. But you said what makes them successful on the job. And how is that different? Like what kind of questions would you have to ask to say they need to be successful at this job? Because I don't think that's the same as just outlining what they do. Is that correct?
Yeah. So some of the things when I first asked that question, as business owners tell me all the time, is they just need to take work off my plate.
Right.
Okay. Well, they could be taking anything off your plate. Doesn't mean it's the right things. Doesn't mean it's impacting the organization. So what's going to happen because they take this work off your plate? So sometimes success is what's going to happen as an organization as a whole because you have someone else doing this work and you're able to do these other things. And that's some place where we really start a lot of times, because a lot of the business owners I work with, they might have a small team, but they're still really early in developing their teams. They're still trying to figure out what to get off their plates in order to not work 80 hours a week. So we really start there because that's what their mindset is I need to work less. I need help. But what happens when you work less and you need help? Why are these the right tasks to get off your plate? So once we figure out what's going to happen organization wise, once this works off your plate, then we say, okay, well, what does it mean for someone to do these tasks well? What happens when they do these tasks well? Does customer service go up? Do your lead times go down? Are you increasing revenue because they are in a position that's like a sales position or a marketing position that's directly bringing in customers. How at the end of the day are you going to say that they made the impact on your business that you wanted when you decided to spend this money?
So if I understand correctly, when we talk about success, it's not the role, it's the outcome that they generate from doing their job, right?
Yeah.
And then analyzing that outcome and first figuring out what the outcome is supposed to be, right?
Yep.
Because so I love that. So that's a really novice approach, Jamie, because technically what we do is we look at the technical about the role, like can you do A, B, C, D, E, F? And if they say yes to that, we're more or less done with the interview process, right? So
Right.
what I really love about that is you're not even, that's a minimum requirement, but the real focus is how did that, what's the outcome that we're looking for? And the outcome starts first rather than the role, I guess. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Find what the
Yes.
outcome is, then build the role. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And to give a quick example, let's look at like role of a front office manager slash receptionist. In one organization, this role might really be responsible for just keeping the office running. They keep everything organized. They're dealing with inventory that come in for like office supplies, things like that. They occasionally answer a phone call or greet someone, but their role is really keep the office running in an organized manner. In another company, that front office manager receptionist could really be responsible for the customer interaction, making that first impression on the customer because there's people coming in all the time. The phone is ringing all the time. So in both those roles, someone might interact with customers, but one, that outcome, that customer interaction, that client interaction is so much more important than the other where it happens occasionally. So when you really figure out what is the outcome, what is the main purpose of this role, what does success really look like, then you can really start narrowing it down from there. It's like, okay, now how do I determine if someone is right for me once you go into those interviews?
So I love that. My business strategy is focusing on the outcome first. What we want, what's the end result first, and then work backwards, right? Because that, and taking that approach for the hire is fantastic rather than focusing on the job description or job duties. What's their end goal? Like, what are they producing? So I really love that. So fantastic. I think everybody listening should adopt outcome, then role. I think that's a great idea. Why do people wait until it's too late to hire? I mean, I've gone into firms and either the staff or the partner or the owner, accounting firms, they're already working 80 hours or the staff's working overtime all the time. Why do we wait so long? Like, why do people do that?
Yeah. The first thing is money. First, if we think about where's this money going to come from? If I pay this person, it has to be built somewhere into my budget. Do I have the money today? Am I going to have the money tomorrow? What happens if my revenue goes down? Am I going to have to fire this person? So there's a lot of thought process about money. The thing is, sometimes when you hire, a lot of times when you hire, your business starts making more money because you have more capacity inside your business. So that's one thing to keep in mind is yes, hiring costs you something, but a lot of times you get a financial ROI. So that's number one thing. The second is that fear of getting the wrong person. As we talked about, like people make a big impact on your organization. Having the right people make an impact on your organization. Having the wrong people could mean that your business ends up going on a downslide or even failing. So when you think about that and you hear those statistics and you hear those numbers, you hear it's one of the top reasons people fail, you say, why should I trust my business in someone else's hands? I can do it. Yes, I might be working 80 hours a week, but at least I am in control. I am in charge. So it's that thing of saying it doesn't always work out that way. Let's focus on getting the right people and let's get things off your plates because that's actually what is good for your business versus you trying to do everything yourself.
Okay, so money's first, but and then the second one was control.
That fear. Yeah, that fear of giving up control.
Losing control, because you're right. Once it goes out of your direct control, you have to trust. So I guess so those are the two issues, but it's like the chicken or the egg, right? How can you increase capacity so that you can earn more so you can pay for this person if you wait till you're overworked? Like how do you deal with those kind of people who say, well, I can't hire because I can't afford it? What are the things that you look for to at least let them think that, well, maybe that's not the real case?
Yes.
What are the triggers?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing that I help people see is great team members don't have to be full-time employees. You can have a great team member starting on a part-time basis. You can have someone that's helping you in some capacity on a contracting basis. So you don't have to say, can I afford someone full-time, 40 hours a week, possibly giving benefits? No, you don't have to start there. You can start small and build your way up. The other thing is to really just look at what is your true budget. There's a lot of places we build expenses into our budget and not even think about it. But people is one of those things where we think so hard about it. And we often say, I can't afford it before we actually look at our numbers. So chances are, if you look at your numbers, you can afford afford some level of team member. Once again, maybe not a full-time team member at first, but you can afford some level of hiring, some level of help in your business. And once again, as we talked about, a lot of times hiring is going to produce that financial ROI. So can you afford this team member until you start getting that additional revenue in is another way to look at it. So when you look at your current budget, it doesn't mean that you need to be able to afford X amount of dollars every month on your current revenue stream forever. It's saying, okay, this person, let's talk about salespeople, for example. This person's supposed to be bringing in X amount of revenue. Well, eventually they should be bringing in enough revenue to cover their own position plus some. And think about what is the roadmap to get there? What is the path to get there? How long will it take somebody to get there? And then you can think about it, okay, well, I only need to afford it on my current budget until we start seeing this impact.
Well, that's good. So what you're saying is on the finance side is look at other areas more closely and see what there is. And then at the same time, also look at, I guess I would call it investment, right?
Yes.
Look at this as an investment, because when you invest in assets and so forth, it doesn't produce an immediate result. It takes time to have it. So you then budget how long will it take for this to. And I love the contract and the part-time. That's a good way to start. So
yeah,
you have something else.
I just wanted to add one thing to that. You mentioned the word investment, and it triggered a conversation I had with a client a few years ago. This client was actually in the financial advisor space, and he was like, I really want to hire someone, but I don't have the money today. And I was like, all right, well, you deal with clients all the time that want to achieve something financially, but they don't have the money for it today. So you're helping them get there. And what do? I'm like, you create a plan to help them be able to afford things. So I was like, so sometimes you got to look at that too, is like, you might not be able to afford the help you want today. How do you start building that buffer? How do you start getting the money in your business? How do you say, all right, even though this position will eventually produce X amount of dollars for my organization, I need to cover them for the first 3 months, 6 months. I don't have that today. So you start a savings plan so that way you can afford that team member for 3 to 6 months, and then you go and hire them once you have that money. So sometimes you do have to plan in advance to be able to afford team members.
Great. I think that's a great way to do it. The key thing now is, remember how we talked about it? They always wait till it's too late.
Yes.
Right? So what are the things that they should be putting into their program so that they can realize way before, or at least a little bit before, the overtime or the burnout or what are the things that they should put in place so that they can understand that, okay, because then you could do the investment. You can say, I'm going to need someone in 6 months or 3 months. I got to be honest with you, with professional accountants and bookkeepers or professional firms, we always wait until there's too much work before we hire, right?
Yeah.
It's a natural thing for us in the business. So if there's any way that we can put some things that will say, hey, wait, like a red flag here, red flag there, that would be great.
Yeah. So the first thing you should really do is look at, what do you want your business to look like 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now in terms of revenue? And sometimes for business owners, we have to back that back to even say, not in terms of revenue, in terms of my income. What do I want to be getting from this? So that way you could say, in order for me to pay myself this, my business needs to be making this amount of money. When you look at that and look at how you want your business to grow, how you want your income to grow, you're going to realize that you will reach a ceiling yourself. You can't keep bringing in that more revenue to pay yourself that more income and keep doing everything yourself. Yes, there's always that thing of, are you charging enough for your services and things like that? But there does become a ceiling of really what you can charge in a lot of places. So you have to look at and say, if I want to keep growing my business, what does that look like in terms of staff? So if I want to double my revenue, can I do it all myself? Okay, I can't do it everything myself. Now, what does that look like? Where do I want to bring people in? So when you're running your business, is it that you're bringing in someone else that's going to be doing client work like yourself? Or you're saying, no, at first I can do that client work, but I need to get all this admin work off my plate that doesn't actually touch any of this. So as I grow my team, those first few hires need to be that admin side. So I can focus more on the client work. They can be those marketers. So that way they're bringing in the clients. I don't have to worry about that part of the process. I'm just doing the work that's coming in. Or it could be that you're saying, no, eventually I'm going to grow to the point where I can't be doing all this client work myself. I'm going to have a junior person. I'm going to have a partner. I'm going to have someone else coming in to help that. So once you really start making that roadmap of what you want your business to look like, then you're already starting to see, oh, this is work I can hand off to this team member. If I had that junior team member, this is an account I could hand off to them because it's super simple once we get them set up and things like that. So you can start seeing where team members could support you in your business. The other thing I encourage is, as business owners, we really need to shift into that mindset of being that business owner, of being that CEO of our business. Too often we get stuck into just being a worker in our business. So we need to take time, I say at least once a quarter, monthly if you can, looking at your business from a CEO, business owner perspective and not from a worker perspective. And part of what I teach people to go through is start looking for one of the 4 signs that it's time to hire. And when you start looking for these signs, you'll start noticing them in your business or start noticing that you're getting close to being there. And when you're just the worker, you're going day in, day out, just getting work done. And you sometimes ignore these. You don't see them because you're just so busy.
Yeah. Since you said 4 signs, what are the 4 signs?
Yes, I figured you'd ask that. Yeah. So the first one is you're reaching your capacity. You're actually saying no to your idea client because you just don't have the time to bring those clients in. That can seem very obvious, but there's a lot of times where we're then just kind of, once again, in that motion, going through the motions of getting work done. It could be that we're actually saying yes, but then we're stressing ourselves out of when am I going to have time to do this? Like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm always behind and I can't catch up. There's some businesses that will have wait lists to say, okay, well, talking about, let's say new clients. Well, I can only take on 1 new client a month. So those other people want to work with you and you're like, well, I can't take you on until this month. So people want to work with you now and you're saying no because the capacity is not there in your business. The second one is that you are starting to lose customers. And this is typically due to poor customer service. So before you would respond to your clients in 1 business day. Now it's taking you 3 business days to respond to your clients. You're always late in deliverables to your clients. So clients aren't getting what they expected from you and what you promised them throughout the early part of your working relationship. So they start not to feel valued. And when they don't feel valued, they're going to start questioning that relationship. Should I continue? Or should I take my money elsewhere to work with a business that actually cares about me and cares about producing work on time, cares about me as a client? It's also on the flip side, not just current clients, but potential clients, where if someone reaches out to you to inquire about working with you, and by the time you get back to them, they've gone elsewhere, that's also a thing of you have kind of that lack in customer service levels where they go elsewhere because they haven't heard from you yet. Sign number 3 is that you want to do something new and different in your business, but you can't because you're always stuck on doing the same thing day in and day out. So this could be, a lot of businesses, like they start to look at what would things be like if I could have a little bit of passive income? Like that's a good example to showcase. But people are like, I can't do passive income because I don't have the time to create anything. I can't start a YouTube channel or a podcast because I don't have the time to do that. All my time needs to be dedicated on what I'm doing now, but doing those other things would bring in another revenue source, but you just can't shift your focus to do that. And then the 4th sign is you're lacking skill or knowledge that's needed in your business. And with business owners, we start a business because we're good at something. And what we're good at is not running a business. Until it's like your 3rd business, your 4th business, you're not good at running a business. You're good at what you're doing for your clients. You then have to learn everything else. And there comes a point in your business where your time is too valuable to keep learning everything else in your business. So you need to start hiring those experts to support those things. It could even be like, you want to take on clients in a different state, but they have completely different laws, completely different rules. You want to take on clients in a different industry, but you don't know that. And should you learn it, or should you hire someone who's already the expert in doing it, where then they can support that and you stay in your lane of expertise?
So I love that. So the 4 things you actually indicated are like the core things to make sure that your overall business is running smoothly. It's funny how you tied it to, again, what I love about the show is we're tying key business strategies right into the employment or hiring phase or intellectual capital that we need for our business. That's great because those 4 things happen all the time. And I guess the question that I'm asking the audience is, do you ever consider staff first, people first related to those 4 questions? Or do you look at technology or something else? You know what I mean? So that is great because I think the fastest way to scale is focusing on the people. So fantastic.
I think it's really interesting that you just brought up technology there. And I feel like it's a mix of things. Sometimes technology is going to be exactly what you need. Sometimes when you're small though, technology isn't the answer first because of the fact that you're still figuring out processes. Your business is still growing and evolving. Right. And sometimes the technology you need, you can't necessarily afford yet because it's really like cost prohibitive. Of course, as we talked about, sometimes are people, but also it's like what you need now in terms of technology might be completely different than what you need a year from now. So if you invest a lot of time and energy in getting set up on certain technology pieces and systems, you might have to redo it all in a year. So I always look at it as you really need to make sure your systems and your processes and everything are pretty standardized, and then look at the technology that's going to support that. And I have a background before I started this business in Lean Six Sigma, where we were really looking at how do we improve processes? How do we remove wasted time in process? How do we improve quality? And even with that, technology was always the last thing we thought about in terms of investing in new technology. Because it's like you have to have your systems in place, you have to have everything in place first, and then find the technology to support it, versus finding technology to support a system and process that actually isn't as effective as it should be.
That's great. It's like putting the cart before the horse kind of analogy.
Yep.
And technology is not the cart. The technology is the horse, right? So you need to, the processes is the cart. So I love that. That's fantastic. And again, part of that cart is the people, right? It's part of you have to have the right people before you, I get it. That's great. One of the other thing that this is one of my favorite words is effective. And what you have in there in a lot of your terminology is you always talk about effective teams, effective. And you know what people tend to do is replace effective from efficient. So what I'd love for you to talk about the difference between an efficient team and an effective team, and why effective should be your primary focus, not efficiency.
Yeah. So when I look at efficiency in a lot of ways, like I love efficiency. It's actually one of my drivers, and the personality is how quickly can we get things done? We're not going to waste any more time doing things than we need to. But with it, a lot of times when you focus on efficiency, it's how quickly can we get stuff done? And it's not necessarily are we doing the right things. So a team member is able to get through that to-do list super quick, super fast. Great. Are they doing the right things? Are they putting in the right effort? Are they getting the right output from that? If we look at, let's talk about someone that's marketing your business. You can go and say, I'm going to hire someone and they're going to create me 20 new posts every week that I can spread across my channels. Well, who cares if they're creating 20 posts if none of them are good posts that are going to produce the outcome that you want? Who cares if they're 20 new posts and they're not on brand? Who cares if they're actually turning away your customers than attracting your customers? No one cares how many posts that they can create. So efficiency, yes, that person is fast. Yes, that person can get stuff done, but are they effective in what they're doing done? Are they meeting the goals? As we talked about, that first thing is knowing the outcome you want. Are they actually achieving the outcome you want with the work that they're doing? 3 really effective posts is going to do more for your business than 20 posts that are just subpar.
By the way, that's a great example, because social media, sometimes we focus on the volume rather than the closing rate or the return rate, right? And the ones that do the higher return rate but might have a slower volume might not get the same praise. And they're the ones we should keep hiring, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So well done. Here's another one. Again, your blog posts. I'm taking a lot of this information from your blog post, Jamie, just let you know. So a lot of these questions are coming from your website. One of the things that I really liked, and I think I've been on the other side, I've been at fault, so I'm going to admit that I didn't do this. So is the fact that you said interview questions, 75% of them should be behavioral questions and only 25% should be general. And my follow-up with that is when we talk general, what about technical questions? Where do those go in that group?
Yeah, it's a good question. All right, so first let's talk about, if those watching don't know, what is a behavioral interview question? A behavioral interview question is where you're really looking for an example from their past work experience. So you're not asking, what does it mean to do XYZ? You're saying, tell me about a time when. So you're really asking them for examples to support their answers. So to talk about where does technical stuff fit in, that falls into those behavioral interview questions. So sometimes it might be, and we've done this before in interviews, what is XYZ? So you're asking them, I want to test your knowledge. What is it? Can you at least tell me what it is? All right, now that you're telling me about what it is, tell me about a time when you noticed this in the client files and such occurred. So we're saying, now show me that you actually have experience with it. You could tell me the definition all day long, but do you actually have experience doing this? So those technical questions fall into those behavioral interview questions. We really want to make sure someone is good at what they do, that they have experience doing what we want, not that they just studied for the interview, not that they just went and know a whole bunch of terms, or they went and looked at a bunch of websites about, here's interview questions you might get asked when you apply for these types of jobs. We want to know, do you actually have experience?
So first of all, very, very, I've just learned something here, because I have to do a lot out of hiring myself at times. So I do ask the technical, but the part that I really love that I'm going to now incorporate is after ask the technical, give me an example. And what I'll do is I'll just write something down about the example, like, and it would be an issue, not necessarily just an example of how to do it, but a problem. And I love that. Now with the two of them, I think we get a better answer, because the hardest part is, you're absolutely right. Honestly, Jamie, I've been in situations where I've asked them a technical question, they've answered it correctly. Bring them on, and we find out that their expertise in that technology over there is just not as well as we thought they were during the interview process. So I really like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think it brings up like something else that I want to talk about earlier in the interview, but I figured we'd eventually talk about questions, so I'd save it to now. Is we were talking about kind of the difference between just being wowed by someone's answer and someone's answer kind of being what you actually need to know. And so what we do when we go through and create questions, and this is something I encourage everybody to do if you're creating your own list of interview questions, is one, as I said, is you're creating your list of interview questions, because every candidate you should be asking the same question. So always have a list of questions before you go into that interview. Is two, write down why you're asking that question. What do you want to know about a candidate because you asked this question? And once you really focus on that why, it helps you when you go back and review what they told you. Was it something that sounded good, or was it an answer that actually showed you that they had the skill, the competency, the experience, or whatever it is that you wanted to uncover because you asked that question? And it helps get you on that side of, I really like this candidate, to this candidate's a good candidate who can do the job. So
now that we're going into the actual interview process, which everybody dreads and hates, and I think both sides do, the applicant and as well as the person doing it. I don't know very many people that enjoy interviewing 10 people in a day. It's just a tough job. But the other part of that is the mountain of applications. And I've had to do that myself. I think every owner or anybody that's been in an executive position have had to do that at one time. Can you have one of your blogs indicated that there's things that you can do to reduce that mountain. And if you could go through that briefly, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So we teach our clients a way to quickly go through the applications. And we've had clients that get 200 applications in a weekend, and they're like, what do I do? Where do I start? I feel overwhelmed. And we're just like, stick to the plan that was created. And what we say is you should have a list of must-have criteria. Remember that you're not hiring someone based off their resume. You're giving them an opportunity to get on the phone with you or to come in for a first interview, which is typically, we always say, a shorter interview. There always should be 2 rounds of interviews for any position, but this is the resume is a gatekeeper for an interview. You're not hiring anybody off their resume. And the problem is sometimes when we go look at resumes, we can get swayed by things that don't matter, which results in us inviting candidates into interview that should have never been invited into interview and ignoring candidates that we should have interviewed. So as I said, you should have some must-have criteria going into reviewing the resumes. And we limit it to 3. You get 3 things to look for on that resume to see if someone is the right fit for you. What these 3 things are, it's going to depend on what you need in that position. What really is most important. I could be helping clients that are hiring pretty much the exact same position, but their 3 must-haves are different because, once again, it's what's important for them in that business. This could be that they have had certain job experience in the past, that you're hiring someone and saying, I need someone who's done this role before. I need someone who's done this role in this industry. So it could be things as simple as that, as you're looking, do they have this type of work experience? Yes. Other things as we're looking at, well, some of these other competencies that might or might not be as direct to see, but we teach them how to see it. So if we're looking for someone that, let's say, is a self-leader, we teach our clients ways like, here's how to identify that someone's a self-leader from their resume. First off, to give you a few hints there, they're not someone who's going to have a very vague resume where you're like, what did they do at this job? I don't understand what they did. Or it's going to be very templated. I did, XYZ in these roles. And it's like, okay, great. Anyone who holds that title does those. They're going to add in those extra pieces of information to help you see that what they did that maybe was beyond their typical responsibilities, things like that. Another sign for a self-leader is they're including things on their resume that they're involved in outside of work. So they're involved in clubs and organizations. They're involved in nonprofits. They're out there taking the initiative to do something more with their time, talent, and treasure. So you look at things like that to say, how do I identify if this person has what I need? When you are looking for 3, you can quickly narrow it down because you're not spending all this time trying to read between the lines, creating the story about a candidate that's probably not true. It's that, all right, do they have these 3 things? Put them in the yes pile. Do they not? Put them in the no pile. If they have 2 of them, maybe put them in a maybe pile, depending on what the third one is that they're missing. So then people will say, well, what if I get a lot of people in my yes pile? That's when we pull in these nice to have criteria. The nice to have criteria is like the icing on the cake. A candidate doesn't have to have this, but if they do, it makes them a better candidate. Sometimes these are things that we really want, but they're hard to tell on a resume. And once again, we don't want to read between the lines. So maybe we put in that nice to have is if we can tell that they have it from their resume, great. But if we can't, I'm not going to disqualify them because that's something we really need to talk about in an interview to really find out if they have what we need. An example of sometimes nice to have is you're hiring for remote positions. Really, the job can be done anywhere, but you would prefer if they're local to you. So sometimes that goes in the nice to have. We're not going to disqualify people from the job if they live in another state, but if they're in my state, if they're in my city, they're going to get bumped to the top of the list. So that way you can take, let's say you have 20 people in your yes list and you're like, I don't have time to interview 20 people. How do we narrow them down? How do we prioritize those candidates? So you start with the ones that are most likely going to be more hireable.
So I'm going to give you the exact opposite that's happening right now in our profession. In professional accounting and bookkeeping is we don't get enough. Like if we have the 3 criteria, we get 0. Like we could have 50, 60, 100 applicants. And and all of a sudden now you're not getting anybody that meets the minimum. What do you do then when there's a reverse situation where there's a lot of people looking for work? That's not the issue, but the right type of person, they're like unicorns now, or it's rare. What do you do then when what's the next phase if you can't get your 3?
Okay. Yeah, it's good. Great question. So I'm going to tell you 2 things. The first one is probably one of those things where you might not necessarily want to be doing it. You're like, Jamie, don't be telling me this. And we're going to start with that. Then we're going to go with the second one. That's probably the most preferred thing to do and the best thing to do is depending on what the market is to really look at that to say, are my must-have things really must-have criteria? Do I need to reevaluate things based on the market and based on what's out there to say, I really wanted someone who had 5 years of experience doing work with this type of clients, but maybe I can drop that down because if someone at least has 5 years experience working in general, they can be trained on that type of clients. So that's one thing to look at. Yes, that does go back and change a little bit of really who your idea candidate was, but sometimes we do have to do that based on the market, based on what's going on. The other thing, and this is actually what tends to be the problem most of the time, is your job posting is not actually speaking to your idea candidates.
I see.
So your idea candidate is either not seeing your job posting at all, or they're seeing it and saying, no, not for me. I'll move on to something else, especially because you're saying these people are these unicorn candidates, probably a lot of people that everybody's going for. So they're only going to apply for the ones that job posting speaks directly to them. So if yours doesn't, they're not applying. And it could be the people that then are applying are those that are then getting into this point where they're desperate. They're going to apply for anything and everything, hoping that somebody bites and they get an interview and they get a job.
Actually, honestly, that's a lot of the applicants are in that range. You hit it. It's funny. I was laughing because I see that a lot. So that's great. So when you have to hire for scaling your business, what do you have to look for? Like, let's say, like you actually mentioned it earlier. So you're maxed out, or you're trying to max out. What are the things that you need? What kind of people do you need to hire to scale, or is it dependent on what stage you're in?
Yeah, it's really going to depend on what stage you're in. It's going to depend on where your expertise lies and where you want to be in your business kind of right now. And there are people that start businesses because they're good at it, but they sit there and say, I don't want to be doing this client work forever. This is not me. I'm just starting this, accounting, bookkeeping business and everything. So I can eventually be the CEO over a whole bunch of other people that are doing the actual client work. If that's you, then you know that when you go to scale your business, you need to scale your business so you can quickly get out of that work and be the CEO of your business. Can't get out of it right away, but that's your path that you're on. Other people, when they go to scale their business, they say, I want to grow bigger, but I never see myself getting 100% out of the client work. So your path for scaling is going to look a little bit different. Maybe right now you're spending 90% of your time doing client work, and maybe one day it'll only be 25% or 10%. But you know that, so you know that you're always going to have a hand in that client work. And once you know where you want to be, it then helps you figure out the right support to bring in. When we look at things, when I'm working with a business owner and they're just really overwhelmed and they're trying to get things things off their plate, I always say, start creating a list. Create a list of the things that are not getting done because you don't have time. Create a list of the things that are always getting pushed off to the to-do list or down to the bottom of the to-do list because you prioritize other things. Think of things that would just be easier to do if you had a second one of you, that you could do more of in your business. Okay, we created this list of things you don't want to do. It's things you don't like doing. It's things you like doing, but you wish you could do more of it in your business. There's things like that. We created this list. Now we're going to prioritize that list based on what is the impact to your business if someone else was doing this work. And once we prioritize based on that impact, we start to see this is the help that I need now. It's one of those things like people always say, the chicken or the egg, the chicken or the egg. Do I bring in more revenue and hire someone to bring in more revenue? Or do I hire the people to support that revenue? Which is first? And so when you prioritize that, you can start figuring out which is first, because maybe if you hire someone to help you bring in the revenue, you have the capacity to handle those additional clients at first. Or it could be that, no, you don't really have the capacity to handle those additional clients. So you need someone on your team first who can help do the client work before you focus on bringing more revenue in.
Well, that's great. Honestly, this has been a very good interview. I have one more question, and I know I'm running out of time, but this one is one that I've had to deal with in the past, and it's going to be an application question. So we'll end off with the application question. What do you think of one of the criteria that I've noticed that firms do is they look at their job history, right? And one of their criteria, and I'm not sure if this is a good or bad one, I'd love to hear your opinion on it, is when the job criteria is they're jumping every 3 months or 6 months, or they have a bunch of, but the expertise tends to be the area that we're looking for. What's your feeling about jumping on an application? Do you give merit to that, or what do you do with that?
Okay, so there's a few different things here. One, look at the dates. That's the first thing, is to look at the dates. I would say any job jumping short term that happened between 2020 and probably mid 2022, give them grace there. Don't disqualify someone because of that, because there's a lot of things, ups and downs in businesses that happened during COVID. People were moving, people having to reprioritize things to stay home with kids. There was so much going on there where people needed to find more flexibility, something that fit them. They were losing jobs. So anything between 2020 and 2022 in years, give them a little bit of grace to say something else might have been going on. That doesn't mean that they're typically a job hopper. Outside of that, there's two things to really look for. Is one, the job change have to do with everything's in a different city. Maybe there was something going on where they started a job and then they had to move for something else. They had to go home to help care for an aging parent. The spouse got a job someplace else and they needed to move. And some things like that, once you really talk to someone, you can find out that there's a reason for it. Now they're in a place where they're stable and that shouldn't be happening again. Also look at titles. Did they get a more advanced title? Was it a more advanced opportunity? This is an industry where that could be, it could be that you look at their job responsibilities and you can see that it was really kind of growth. It was growth and opportunity. They were learning. And now they're at a spot where they're going to be able to go and apply all that knowledge. So it could be some things like that. What I say is try not to judge too quickly on that, but that might be one of those things where you say, this candidate has a lot of what I'm looking for. I'm going to put them in the maybe category and only bring them in if I really need to bring some additional person in. What my biggest hesitation here, and one of the things that almost immediately makes somebody a no, unless everything else on their resume is spectacular, is if they had a lot of job hopping and there were gaps between the end of one and the start of another, which typically means they were being fired and then they needed to go and find a new job. So it took them a while to find that new job, or they're leaving without anything being prepared. So they're probably maybe a disgruntled employee that's coming in and they get fed up one day and they say, I'm done. Then they have to go and start the job search again. So there's gaps between the end of one and the start of another. I always, on the people side, I'm like, maybe this person just needs an opportunity to find the right home for them. But do we really want to take that risk? You have to weigh things as a business. But that's the one side where I say, if there's those big gaps between all the opportunities, you have my permission to judge them a little harsher on that. I hate saying that, but because I feel for the people on the other side, but we still have to make good business decisions as business owners. A lot of the other side, just look at, can you detect why on the resume? Does it seem like there's a pattern that's good, a pattern that's bad? And sometimes it just requires having that conversation. So if you're having a lot of low candidates and you're seeing this and everything else is great, have the conversation, find out what was going on. There might be something that you're like, oh, now that I know that, there's no way I'm going to hold that against you. Or it could be, well, now that we've had that conversation, I don't think you're going to be a long-term employee, so we're just not going to risk it.
So it's a cause for concern, but not necessarily a elimination of the applicant.
Yes.
And then the gaps, I guess the gaps, you're right. I mean, I get your point. Gaps could mean negatives, right? So perfect. Well done. So, Jamie, I really enjoyed our conversation today, by the way. I think this was extremely informative. And one thing I really got out of this is focus on outcomes first. Behavioral questions are more important.
Yes.
Right? So to get the right fit. And I really enjoyed this. Jamie, if people want to get a hold of you, or if they want to really talk to you and get know more about you, how can they do that?
Yes. Well, if you want to jump on the phone and chat with me, figure out what the next steps are for hiring in your business, you can go to growingyourteam.com/jumpstart. Jumpstart being all one word, and schedule a call with me, and we can talk about your hiring needs and possibly how growing your team can support you with that. Or if you just want to look around more about what we do, what we have to offer, check out some of those blog posts, you can head on over to growingyourteam.com.
And you have a great podcast too. Talk a little bit about your podcast.
Yes, I have the Growing Your Team podcast where we talk about all things hiring and leading teams within small businesses. And it should be available on all major podcasting platforms, or you can go over to growingyourteam.com/podcast to check out all those episodes.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so much. And I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Jamie, once again, thank you for joining us today. And to you, our valued viewers, a huge thank you for tuning into our episode today. We kindly ask that you subscribe to our channel. And as always, please, we welcome your comments and feedback below. Until next time, always be hydrated, always be curious, and above all, stay well.